Go.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Wish everybody a happy Father's Day.
You too.
Well, thank you very much. Try to mention that again at the worship hour. But it's good to see everybody. Thank y'all for coming today and putting God first. We appreciate that, and God appreciates that.
Father's Day.
And Keisha said, like today is, every Lord's Day is God's Father's Day, but we've got to always make sure that we put God first, what He expects us to do. And so thank y'all for doing that today. So if you would, turn to number 474. Number 474, we'll try to sing the first and last verse of that song. Then Brother Bobby will lead us in our prayer, and then we'll have our class. All right. And y'all remember the lesson Sunday night, right? Sing out. And we did a really good job Sunday night after the lesson. I couldn't believe y'all were actually paying attention. So let's all try to sing out. There's not many of us here, so let's. You don't want to listen to my awful voice, so let's all sing out, and it all kind of blends in together, and we know it's pleasing to God. So, all right, number 474, "Sing to Me of Heaven," first verse and third verse. Let us sing. Sing to me of heaven, sing that song of peace. From the toils that bind me, it will bring release. Burdens will be lifted that are pressing so. Showers of great blessing o'er my heart will flow. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of its golden glory, of its pearly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven's sweetest song of all. Sing to me of heaven tenderly and low, till the shadows o'er me rise and swiftly go. When my heart is weary, when the day is long, sing to me of heaven, sing that old sweet song. Sing to me of heaven, let me fondly dream of its golden glory, of its pearly gleam. Sing to me when shadows of the evening fall. Sing to me of heaven's sweetest song of all. Brother Bob.
Dear Heavenly Father, we're thankful to be here this morning to hear another portion from the Word. We pray that each one of us will be greatly blessed and carry it with us throughout the week. We pray for all those who aren't here this morning, those who are sick, who are needing your blessing. We pray that for those who are traveling, that you provide them with a safe trip to their destination and back. We pray that you be with all the poor and the hungry, those who are lost, that you would give them hope somehow. We pray that you would be with our country, that you would help us to always be a free country, and not to allow those rogue nations to get the courage to take us on. We thank you for this land that we live in and for all the freedoms we enjoy. And we thank you for the defenders of our freedom, especially those who are in harm's way and may have lost their lives while defending us. We pray that you would go with us now to our study, that you would forgive us for all of our many sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. guys would turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 21. That's where we are in our study. And so we noticed, again, just to remind ourselves, beginning in verse 20, from this point onward, we're looking at the last week of Jesus' earthly ministry. So verse 20, Jesus entered into Jerusalem on Sunday. And so last week we looked at basically the main events that are recorded that happened on Monday, which were Jesus cleansing the temple of the money changers that were in there, the people that were selling the sacrificial doves, and they were ripping people off basically. And so Jesus demonstrated righteous anger, and he clears them out. And then we noticed about cursing the fig tree as well, and the idea was, some people look at that, wow, that's really harsh of Jesus to do that just because it didn't have any fruit. But the lesson was, he was talking about Israel. The fig tree was a symbol of Israel, that the leaves, they demonstrate, they have leaves, but they don't have fruit. So the leaves is their profession of faith, but what about the fruit? They're not bearing any fruit. So they claim that they're servants of God, but when it comes right down to it, they're not really doing what God has told them to do. They're not bearing any fruit. And so that's why Jesus cursed the fig tree. It's got leaves but no fruit. And he's saying the same thing about Israel. You're going to be cursed. You're going to be punished because they're not obeying God, and ultimately they're going to reject Jesus as the Son of God, as the Messiah. And so he's telling them they're going to be severely punished for that. Probably a reference to the destruction of Jerusalem, which will take place by the Romans in AD 70, some 30 or 40 years after Jesus says this. So most likely he's making a reference to that. So we are now on in chapter 21. We want to look at verses 23 through 27. And Jesus is talking about authority, because he's asked a question, people again trying to trip him up, and they wind up, they're going to wish they hadn't asked this question, because as always, Jesus is going to put them in a box when they were trying to put him in a box about spiritual authority. So let's read in chapter 21 there, verses 23 through 27. And when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, By what authority doest thou these things? And who gave thee this authority? And Jesus answered and said unto them, I also will ask you one thing, which if ye tell me, I and likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, whence was it, from heaven or of men? And they reasoned with themselves, saying, If we say from heaven, he will say to us, Why did ye not then believe him? But if we shall say, Of men we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, We cannot tell. And he said unto them, Neither tell I you by what authority I do these things. You're going to answer my question, I'm not going to answer yours. Now we're going to see a little bit later, Jesus will answer the question, but not at this point, because again, he's boxed them in when they were trying to trap him in something. So this takes place on Tuesday. Okay, last week of Jesus' earthly ministry. So Jesus comes into the temple on Tuesday, and he's teaching the people. Now, what is he teaching them? I don't mean specific, just in general. What's he teaching them? Yeah, God's word, right? He's teaching them the gospel. This is what God, these are the commands of God. This is what God wants you to do if you want to be faithful to him. So that's what he's teaching to the temple. And so, in the temple, so he's confronted here, as usual, okay, by the chief priests, the elders, and also we want to notice the scribes. Now, Matthew doesn't mention the scribes here. He just says the chief priests and the elders. But both Mark and Luke, in their accounts, they mention that the scribes were also there. Okay, so you had the chief priests, and that's Mark 11:27 and Luke 20 and verse 1. They both mention the scribes. So you got the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes. and they're trying to trick Jesus or trap him. They're trying to get him to say something that will cause him to lose favor among the people that he's teaching. Okay? Trying to demonstrate we're the ones that really have spiritual authority, not Jesus. Okay? That's what they're trying to do, but it's going to backfire pretty spectacularly here, as it usually does. You think they learn after a while. They continually try to trap him, and they always wind up being the ones with egg on their face. And you think, after a while, we're just going to quit challenging him. We can't. But they keep doing it. And I guess from their point of view, they have no choice because they're losing influence among a lot of people, so they've got to try to do something. Now, David, way back in the day, David had divided the priests into 24 classes. And in each class of priests, they had a head of that class that was called the chief priest. Okay, so that's why you see this here. This is plural. It says the chief priests. You think, well, isn't there only one chief priest? Well, you had a chief priest over all 24 of these classes. Okay, and so I don't know if that means all 24 of them were there that day, but at least more than one. Some of them were there, and they're going to challenge him. Okay, now the elders that are being referred to here, these are the city government rulers. Okay, it's in Jerusalem. So what kind of people? We're not talking about the Romans here, so who would they be? They're the local city government rulers who ruled under the Romans, so who would they be? What faith would they be? They're Jews. Okay, so these are not the Romans he's talking about in elders. These are the Jewish local Jerusalem city government leaders. Now, they had to answer to the Roman government, but they were given a certain amount of autonomy within Jerusalem. So that's who he's referring to there. And then the scribes. Well, who are the scribes? Well, they recorded a lot of things. They recorded the scriptures. But what's being referenced here is the scribes were the authorized teachers. Okay, so they were authorized to teach God's will. And so again, they come in and they're going to challenge you. Who gave you authority to do this? This is the job of the scribes, to be teaching everybody God's will. Who do you think you are that you can teach God's will? And Jesus probably thinking, well, I'm not much of anybody other than the Son of God, so maybe I'm qualified to do that. But that's what they're challenging about. Okay, now, when they're asking about this authority, do you think the chief priests, the elders, the scribes, sometimes the Pharisees are involved, or the Sadducees, are they truly wanting to know where true authority comes from? No.
They're already assuming they are.
Right, they assume they are, right? So yeah, they're not really interested in true spiritual authority, as you and I should be. Okay, so again, if I came in here and I'm trying to convince you all that I'm the spirit, well, I'm the preacher around here, so y'all have to do what I say. It doesn't matter what the Bible says, y'all need to listen to me. That's kind of what they were doing. They were asserting their own authority over God's authority. And if I were ever to do that, y'all need to not waste any time kicking me out of here, because I have no spiritual authority whatsoever. I'm just telling you what the Bible says, and we've got to stick to that. Well, they weren't doing that. They were teaching what they wanted to teach, and they're not really interested in true authority from God. They're talking about their man-made, their self-anointed authority that Jesus is a challenge to. And unlike them, Jesus actually has true spiritual authority because he is God. They've got this fake authority that they've created, but they don't want to lose that. And they see Jesus as a challenge, to which of course he is a challenge because their authority is fake. Okay? And so the kind of the insinuation here is the Jewish leaders, they had schools, religious schools. And so if you were a scribe, you would go and you would get this training and you would graduate from this school, and then you were authorized to go out and teach people about the scriptures, right? So it kind of in the modern vernacular would be like they had a degree in this, so to speak. But where did that degree come from? It's man-made. That's what it was, right? And so, well, what about Jesus? Did Jesus attend any of their schools? Excuse me, no. He didn't go to any of their schools. He hadn't attended their classes. He hadn't graduated. So who does he think he is? He can't teach this unless he's gone to one of our schools and been trained by our people. Well, does Jesus need to be trained by them? No. No. He's the Son of God. He doesn't need any training from anyone, right? But that's what this is about. So they're, oh, how dare you? You don't have our status. And that's really what it's about, is protecting their own status. Because the people looked up to them, respected them because, hey, I've got a degree, right? And Jesus is showing us you don't need a degree. You need to have an understanding of the Scriptures. That's what it's about, okay? And so you have, I would take objection to, there are, some congregations today, we do have preacher training schools that you can go to. And there are some congregations that they will require their preacher, before they'll hire a preacher, well, you have to have a degree from this preacher training school. Well, according to this, is that really necessary? No. Again, that's a man-made school. Now, hopefully, they're teaching the truth, but the point is, you can't bind what God has not bound. So they make something a requirement that God, Jesus didn't have a degree, Peter didn't have a degree, Paul didn't have a degree, they didn't go to preacher training schools, they studied the Scriptures. Now, I'm not bashing preacher training schools. Again, if it's faithful and if it's teaching the truth, it's a very good thing to go to. And I'm attending some of those classes just for my own. You all didn't require me to do it. Chester didn't require me to do it, but I'm doing it because I want to increase my Bible knowledge. But to make that a requirement, I think is, again, you're going beyond what the Scriptures, the requirement ought to be that you study the Bible daily, you diligently research, and you try to do your best to know what it says, rather than what some man-made school tells you. And so Jesus doesn't really need a degree. He doesn't need any training from their school, but they're insulted that he thinks he can teach without going to one of their schools. So they ask him, they challenge him, well, who gave you the authority to come here in the temple and teach people spiritual truth? And of course the answer is, well, God the Father gave him the authority, but that's not what they're interested in. So rather than just answer their question, Jesus saying, well, I have authority because I am the Messiah, I am the Son of God, I have the authority of God, that's why I'm here. Rather than doing that, he puts it back on them, as he often does. He answers a question with a question. And I have a preacher friend of mine that he does that to me all the time. It really irritates me. I'll ask him, what do you think about that? What do you think? I don't want to know what I think. I want to know what you... But he does that all the time. I'll ask a question. He'll answer it with a question. Okay? But the master teacher, that's what he typically did, to make us think. Right? So he says, well, instead of me just directly answering this, I'm going to ask you a question. And he says, if you'll answer my question, then I'll answer you. I'll tell you by what authority I have this. But I want you to answer me a question. Because remember, there's a lot of people around that Jesus has been teaching. So there's all kinds of people in there. We have no idea how many, but probably Jesus tended to draw large crowds. There's probably a lot of people in there. And so he asked us, I'll ask you a thing. If you'll tell me, I'll tell you. The baptism of John, where did that come from? Did John have the authority of God to do that? Or did John just make it up on his own? Does he have God's authority or man's authority? Okay? Now, and we know the answer, right? So, and I preached a sermon on that just, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, whenever it was. We talked about the baptism of John. And how, yes, indeed, it was authorized by God, but it was only for a limited time. It was replaced by the baptism of Christ. But John definitely was authorized by God to do what he did for that period of time, to pave the way for Jesus. Right? And so that's the answer. that John's baptism was from God, but Jesus is putting them on the spot. So you tell me, did John's baptism come from God or did it come from men? And this is a question that I'm sure Jesus knew right off the bat, that there was no good way for them to answer that would benefit them. I mean, the true answer is it came from God, but they don't want to say that. So there's no answer that they could come up with that would benefit them and make them look good, which is what they were trying to do. So Jesus very cleverly boxes them in. There's no way out to really answer this question. And even what they ultimately come up with still makes them look bad, as they try to weasel out once they realize, oh wow, there's no really good way to answer this question. Okay? And so if they admit that John was sent by God, if they admit that, which that's the true answer, then they know, and notice what it says here, and they reasoned with themselves. So you can kind of make this mental picture. You could just imagine it's kind of like a football team huddling up, right? So they all huddle over here. Okay, how are we going to answer this? What are we going to do? And they're talking with each other, trying to conspire and figure out how can we answer this question. But they realize, they reason, well, if we say that John's authority came from heaven, that it came from God, which is the right answer, the true answer, but if we admit that, then what's Jesus, they're anticipating, what's he going to come back with? If we say, well, John's baptism came from God, well then,
So did mine.
do what?
So did mine.
Yeah, his is too. But what did they do? What happened to John?
They cut his head off.
They cut his head off. Now that was specifically, Herod did that because he said you can't be married to this woman. But did they believe John? No, they had rejected John too, right? So if they say, well, the baptism of John, it was authorized by God, then Jesus is going to ask them, well, then why didn't you believe him? You say his authority came from God, and yet why did you reject him? They know that's what Jesus is going to say, which of course he would, because that's what I would have said. If I asked you that question and you said, well, yeah, this is God's authority, and you weren't doing it, that'd be my question. Well, then why aren't you obeying it? Why did you reject it? If you admit it comes from God, so they know that's what Jesus is going to say. Doesn't take a PhD to figure that out, right? That's the obvious comeback on that. Well, why did you go along with it then? Why did you turn your back on John? Why did you prosecute John if he came from God? So they can't say that. But then in verse 26, so the other choice Jesus gave them, well, did it come from God or men? Because really that's your only two choices. Then verse 26, well, if we say then that it came from men, John's authority didn't really come from God. It's just he created it or some other person created it. What's wrong with saying that? According to verse 26. Do what? The people did, right. So it says, we fear the people. For all of them felt John was a prophet from God. So if they said, well, his authority only came from men, it really didn't mean anything. What do you think they mean by we fear the people? What does that mean? What are they afraid of?
They'll turn on.
They'll turn on him. Right? Because if they all think John's a prophet and I'm going to stand there and bash John in front of all these people, they're going to turn on me in all likelihood. So that's what they're afraid of that. Well, if we say it comes from God, then Jesus is going to hammer us. Why do you believe it? So the best answer for us would be to say it comes from men. But then if we do that, everybody in this room, everybody in the temple is probably going to turn against us. And then we're going to be in real trouble. So Jesus has given them an impossible question. Like, whichever answer we give, we're basically going to cut our own throat. And of course, that's why Jesus asked the question. Oh, you want me to answer a question? Well, here, you answer this one. And then I'll answer the question you've asked me. Because they were trying to trap him, and he winds up trapping them. Okay? And so, in verse 27, or something else I wanted to point out. Hold your place here. Look over at John chapter 1. I wanted to point this out too. Going back to, if they admitted that John's authority came from God, they have to admit something else. Okay, so look at John chapter 1. Let's begin reading in verse 32. Let's see what else they would have to admit if they admitted John's authority came from God. John 1, beginning in verse 32. John bare record, saying, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove, and it abode upon him. And I knew him not. But he that sent me to baptize with water, the same said unto me, Upon whom thou shalt see the Spirit descending and remaining on him, the same is he which baptizeth with the Holy Ghost. Now, verse 34, here's the key. This is John. And I saw and bear record that this is the Son of God. Who's John talking about? Jesus. John said Jesus is the Son of God. So if these guys admit that John's authority came from God, again, Jesus said, why did you not believe him? John said Jesus was the Son of God. They would, not only would they, if they admitted John's power or John's authority came from heaven, they would also have to admit that Jesus was the Son of God. They certainly don't want to do that. But then again, as we said, if they give the other answer, then the people are going to turn against them. And they don't want to do that. So let's think about this question from our perspective. Because this, like everything Jesus did, it doesn't just apply to the people in that temple on that day. Who are these lessons also directed at? Us today. Okay? So you'll have some people, well, this book was written so long ago, it doesn't apply to us. Everything applies to us. Okay? And it's really, some of them are a little bit harder to find. Some of them are hit you right in the face. It's a pretty simple lesson. And I think this one's not too complicated to figure out. So this question that Jesus asked them, and he's specifically referring to the baptism of John, but think about it in a wider scope. We need to be able to answer the same question. Okay? So think about everything that we do, spiritually speaking, everything that we do of a religious nature, in the worship service, in Bible study, the way we live our life, everything. The authority that we use to behave in certain ways and do certain things, does it come from God or does it come from men? Don't we need to ask ourselves that question? Every time we do something related to God, don't I need to ask myself, okay, do I have God's authority to do this, or is this a man-made tradition? Because if we're engaged in man-made traditions, is that pleasing to God? No. I got to make sure I've got God's authority. You know, why do we partake of the Lord's Supper every Sunday?
Because there's more scripture that tells us to.
Yeah, and Maurice usually tells us when he gets up there. A lot of times he'll remind us there's 4 different places where God has commanded us to do that. So do we have the authority of God to partake of the Lord's Supper? Yes. Okay? It tells us when to do it, right? So can we do the Lord's Supper on Thursday night?
No,
Why not? Maybe I want to do it on Thursday night.
You're Lord.
that's not God's way.
It's not God's way, right? If God had wanted me to do it on Thursday night, He had told me to do it on Thursday night. When did God say to do it? First day of the week, which is Sunday, first day of the week.
Could I tell the story about the nursing home? Could I tell
Sure,
the story
sure,
about the nursing
sure.
home?
because you realize it's not authorized on it. Yes, the Lord's Supper is a wonderful thing to do, but not if we do it our own way. We need to do it the way God said, because God has given us instructions. So if I do it on a Thursday night or a Friday morning or whatever, it's not acceptable to God. Okay? That's a tradition of men. And there are some people that do it on different days. And so God said do it on the first day of the week. Which first day of the week?
First,
Every. Right? Did God specify? I want you to do it on the first Sunday of March. And then do it on the third Sunday of February. What did he say? He said the first day of the week. Which week? Every week. Right, because he didn't specify a particular week. So a kindergartner ought to be able to figure out, if I told you, okay, I want you to do this on the first day of the week, and I don't specify a certain week, that means every first day of the week. Okay? My trash man, he comes on Thursday. Which Thursday? Every Thursday. To pick up the trash. I don't have to specify a certain Thursday. He comes on Thursday. Well, that means every Thursday. Unless I specify, I want you to come on the third Thursday of the month or whatever. So it's clear God wants us to do it every Sunday. So you have some religious groups, they will partake of the Lord's Supper maybe once a year. Or twice a year. Or quarterly. Where's their authorization to do that?
Or at a wedding.
Or at a wedding. Yeah, I was in a wedding one time where and this was on a Saturday, and they did the Lord's Supper in a wedding, and I was shocked. I'd never seen that before. I said, what do we do? You can't do this on a Saturday at a wedding. What's the Lord's Supper got to do with this couple getting married? It's a wonderful thing to celebrate a couple getting married, but that's not about the blood of Jesus. But they did that. And the other thing I remember, and the guy doing it, he'd been a chaplain in the army, and I remember he made a statement that just really shocked me when he said they were going to do this, and he prayed to God about it, and he said, God, may we be so bold as to bless this cup. What? Yeah, you're bold, all right. I'm looking for a lightning bolt, like what? May you be so bold? You think you can bless the cup? Only God can bless. I don't have any authority, and neither did he, to bless the cup. I mean, we're doing it on the wrong day to begin with for the wrong reason, and then we're going to be so bold as we're going to bless the cup. No, I don't think you ought to do that. That's a tradition of men. That didn't come from God. Okay, so we need to ask ourselves the same question. What are we doing in the worship service? Why are we doing it? It's like I talked about Sunday night. Why do we sing?
Make a joyful noise.
Please God.
Yeah, to please God, right? Because God told us to sing. Okay? Why don't, because most of the world does, why don't we get us a piano up here?
It doesn't say
There's
we
his
need.
money.
God didn't command that. Okay, some people, well, he didn't say not to do it. Well, again, if you had to fill the Bible with every thou shalt not, you'd never get the book in the room. God gives us principles, and the principle is when God says do something, we do it. If he doesn't tell us to do it, then don't do it. Especially in a worship service. When God has given us clear instructions, these are the things I want you to do in a worship service. Nowhere does he mention, I want you to plug an instrument, I want you to play a piano or a guitar, I want you to have a praise band. All that stuff that the world is enamored with, those are traditions of men. We always ask ourselves, where does the authority to do this? Where is my authority for the Lord's Supper? It comes from God. Where is my authority to have a piano? That comes from men. Therefore, we are not to do it. Okay, so those are just a couple of examples, right? But saying that's the lesson Jesus wants us to get out of this. Make sure everything that we do is pleasing to God. This is what God has asked us to do, and we need to do that. If God didn't tell us to do it, then we need to stay away from it. And especially those things, if God openly forbids it, we definitely need to stay away. If God says don't do something, then don't do it. Okay? It's very simple. So that's a really good question for you and me today. It's not just, we don't want to look down our nose at them. Yeah, those stupid scribes back then, boy, they didn't get it. Well, sometimes people today don't get it either. Just as bad as they are. We want to make sure we're not those kind of people. We want to have a book, chapter, and verse. We want to have a thus saith the Lord. Why do y'all do that? Because God told us to do it. That's why we do it. Why don't you do this? Because God didn't tell us to do it, so we're not going to do it. And again, going back to the crowd, well, God didn't forbid it. He didn't say you couldn't do it. So you want to gamble that God's okay with it. So if God didn't tell me to do it and I don't do it, am I safe? God didn't say to do it, so I don't do it. Am I safe? Yeah. I got nothing to worry about. God didn't tell me I couldn't do it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. Am I safe? I'm rolling the dice. Well, maybe God doesn't care. Do I want to risk my soul on that? I don't. Hope y'all don't either. I don't want to risk it. If God didn't mention it, I'm going to stay away from it. And what God told me to do, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I know I can't go wrong as long as I do that. There's no way on the day of judgment that I can get in trouble for doing exactly what God told me to do and not doing what God did not command me to do. I can't get in any trouble over that. So why would you want to risk it? And yet people do that all the time. Let's roll the dice and see what happens. I don't want to roll the dice with my eternal soul. Because I don't want to wind up in that hot place. Okay? So, good lesson for us too. Have God's authority in everything that we do. Now, in verse 27, notice their response. They've huddled up and well, if we say it's from heaven, then Jesus is going to get us on that. If we say it's men, then everybody's going to turn against us. We have no good answer. So they respond pretty much like any dishonest person would when they realize that they're wrong about something and they don't want to admit that they've been wrong. They quickly would like to just change the subject. Well, let's just move on. Let's quit talking about that. You've got me a place I don't want to be, so let's just... They quickly want to try to weasel out of this if they can. They're trying to find an exit door when there really is no exit door, but that's what they're looking for. Okay, so dishonest person, they're going to refuse to admit they're wrong. Once they see they're trapped, that's when people will get mad and storm off. They just want to end the discussion. Well, I'm just, we've seen people do that because they realize they're in the wrong, but they don't want to admit it. Okay? So what do they answer? And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. What a weaseling answer, right? Well, we don't know. What else could they say? Right. Well, we just can't really tell. We're not really sure. I mean, that's really kind of a cop-out of an answer.
And that's in front of all those people.
In front of all those people. And I'm about to tell you why that's bad too. So, really, there's three possible answers. It came from God, it came from men, or we don't know. All three are going to make them look bad. Now, I'm going to tell you why in a second about this last one. But so Jesus responds and says, well, then I'm not going to answer your question either. If you can't answer my question, I'm not going to answer yours. Now, he will answer it later. He's going to tell us. Of course, he had authority of God. But for right now, he said, well, you're not going to answer me, I'm not going to answer you. Okay? But think about this, the answer that they came up with, we don't know. That made them look really bad for the people too, because what have they been telling everybody about spiritual matters? Who knows the answers? They do. You're too stupid to understand the answers. You just better let us explain it to you. So they always had that pompous, arrogant attitude. We're the only ones that have spiritual truth. You peasants don't know anything. We'll explain it to you. So any spiritual question we can answer. Here's a spiritual question they can't answer. Does that make them look bad in front of the crowd?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I thought you guys said you knew everything. Right? So they think they found a way out of it, but really they haven't. That makes them look bad too, because they're admitting they don't know, which they really do know, but they're admitting they don't know something. Oh, well, you guys said you had all spiritual truth. Apparently you don't know all of it. So it's just a masterful, again, teaching moment by Jesus, giving them no way out when they were trying to give him no way out. But he quickly turned the tables on them. And so they embarrass themselves by saying, well, we don't know, we can't answer the question. That's almost as bad as picking one of the other two. Okay? And so that's what happens there. They're supposed to be able to answer any spiritual question, but they can't. Now, think about this way. And we, all those Wednesday nights, we looked at the evidence for God and the proof and stuff, and talked about how when you point out to these people that evolution doesn't add up and the Big Bang doesn't add up and stuff, and they get upset about it. And as we said, they've tried to shut down all debate. Evolution is not to be questioned. You just have to believe. Why do they want to shut down a debate? Yeah, they don't want you to believe in God. But if their story is true, should it not hold up to examination? It should. Right? So think about, as we said, a dishonest person, that's kind of how they look at it. An honest person has nothing to fear from an investigation of their ideas. Like if somebody comes to me, well, you're one of those Jesus guys, you believe in God. Yes, I do. Well, let's investigate that and let's ask some questions. My attitude ought to be, knock yourself out. Instead of, no, don't you dare question my faith in God. No, go ahead, ask your questions. Let's investigate. Okay? Because if it turns out, if they investigate my ideas about God or anything else, if it turns out that the investigation discovers that I've been wrong about something, then I can change my worldview, and don't I want to be right? So if I am wrong, then it will show me the error of my ways, and in a spiritual sense, if somebody shows me that I've been wrong spiritually, I can repent for that and get back on the right path if I've veered off. So I shouldn't fear that. If, on the other hand, the investigation shows that I'm right, then that just reaffirms, it confirms my position and gives me even more confidence that, yeah, I've read the scriptures correctly and know what I'm talking about. So either way, I should have nothing to fear from an investigation. It's either going to show me where I went wrong so I can correct it, or it's going to reaffirm that I'm right. So an honest person shouldn't have any fear of people asking questions about what we believe.
You just included the case for presidential debates.
Yeah, presidential debates. Because now they don't want to have presidential debates, and we all know why. And I'm not making fun of Joe Biden, but he's got dementia. Did y'all see that speech he did yesterday or the day before? He's pitiful. He ended it. He said, "God save the Queen." He said, "God save the Queen," and then he's trying to figure out how to get off the stage. I feel sorry for him. I really do. He's got dementia. He doesn't, and they're exploiting him. That's why they don't want to debate, because they know he'll get killed in a debate. But I'm like, look, if your guy, and take him out of the equation, any politician, I don't care what party they're in, this is not political, it's just talking about any politician, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. If you're afraid to have a debate, if you're afraid for people to ask you questions about your ideas, that's a person I don't want to vote for. What are you afraid of? If your ideas are that great, they ought to bear up to scrutiny. Okay? If my faith in God is that great, it ought to bear up to scrutiny. So I don't try to shut the other side up. I don't tell people, how dare you ask questions about God and the Bible. You can't ask anything. Yeah, ask it. I need to be able to answer it. Okay? Just like the evolutionists, I need to be able to ask them questions, and they need to have to answer it. They don't want to do that. That tells me there's something wrong. Anybody that doesn't want to answer questions, there's something there. What are you trying to hide? Let's get it all out in the open. Right? And so we need to keep an open Bible. We need to keep an open mind. And we need to be willing to make changes in what we believe if those changes are necessary to make sure that we're pleasing God. We should have nothing to fear about that. And so these religious, so-called religious leaders, they had everything to fear by Jesus kind of putting them on the spot because they couldn't answer the question. And as we'll see, Lord willing, next week, Jesus will, he will answer the question they asked him. He just didn't want to answer it right at that minute because he wanted to put them on the spot. All right, any questions, comments about that section? All right, well, let's take a break and we will begin our worship service.